All right, good morning. My name is Jeff Orock here at the National Weather Service office in Wakefield, standing in for Katie, who's enjoying maybe just a little bit more of her Thanksgiving holiday. Going to talk about the weather here, really focusing on, I'd say, the next 72 hours, even the next 24 hours, where we're expecting most of the weather this week. So we'll kind of run through that, what we expect, what the event should do, maybe what it won't do. And so we'll kind of just cover that for the whole Commonwealth here for this Monday morning, December 1st. So there are winter weather advisories in effect that cover a good portion of the Commonwealth, at least out in the west, mainly the Shenandoah parts of the Piedmont there. We do have Louisa and Fluvanna in the far east here in the winter weather advisory, but definitely more widespread as you get more towards the 81 corridor from Whitfield all the way up through Harrisonburg and even up at Northern Virginia there. And we're going to be mainly targeting mostly some light freezing rain, maybe mixing with a little bit of snow at times. But the good news is it does look like this is going to change over to all rain as we push through Tuesday, especially afternoon. So we'll talk about that as we go on. But these are the winter weather advisories as they stand right now. They could get updated again this afternoon. I wouldn't expect much change. I think this is pretty well dialed in, where we expect at least some minor wintry impacts here over the western parts of the Commonwealth. As far as just big picture weather systems, what's going on today, we're not in too bad a shape, but for basically late tonight, early tomorrow, we got this little wave of low pressure that's kind of moving up along the coast, and it's going to throw moisture, back to the north and west, and we're going to have just enough cold air in place, over the Piedmont and the mountains and Shenandoah to give us that. Mostly going to be from some light freezing rain mixed in with a little bit of snow. Then Wednesday looks great. Front's going to come through, high pressure is going to build in, be nice and dry. Another front comes through here on Thursday. That's probably going to be mostly dry. And then we're going to keep a little bit of an eye on, I'd say, Friday, maybe late Friday into Saturday. That's a big question mark. The models keep going back and forth. This depiction here probably shows more snow and ice than what the models are really suggesting right now. They've backed off a little bit. They have the system a little weaker and further to the south. So it could start out as a wintry mix there Friday night and extend to Saturday and then change over to rain. But trend has been less wintry weather late this week. So we'll just have to see if that changes. There's some real question marks as we get into late this week. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, here at the end. So just kind of look at areas that we may see some travel impacts. This is kind of a map that really shows you the probability of experiencing at least minor impacts. So maybe some slick bridges, ice, kind of building up in the trees a little bit. Maybe you get some snapped little tree limbs here. Nothing too severe. We're not talking about, trees coming down or a big ice storm here, but this just shows you the areas that we could see some good light icing and maybe a little bit of light snow. Ignore these little weird pockets there where it says nothing's going to happen. That's kind of a figment of the models there, but you get a general sense here that Richmond's really on the eastern edge, only about a 20% chance that we're going to see any type of light icing in Richmond. And that's why we don't have winter weather advisories there at all. But as you get back towards Louisa, Fluvanna, into the Piedmont, the probability jumps up to about 40% probability. And then when you get into the mountains, pretty much looking like it's going to be a slam dunk. We're going to see at least a brief period there of some light freezing rain that may cause us some impact. So the area here in the red especially kind of outlining that area we're expecting maybe some issues here really late tonight and then into Tuesday morning. So jumping right into the forecast, I'm here on the left. You're seeing the forecast of ice. So pretty good broad area here of just light ice. It's all, no more than 1/10 of an inch, but maybe enough to get us a good coating here, especially as you get back towards some of the more elevated areas here. Back more towards Louisa, Fluvanna here in places in the east, west of Farmville, the icing's probably going to be really, really light and brief. But as you push back into the better elevation, that's where the freezing rain might be able to hold on just a little bit longer. And we'll step through that here with some simulated reflectivity in a minute. And you do notice there could be a little bit of snow mixed in, especially once you get north of Roanoke and you get up towards, 64, where 64 to 81 meet north. Maybe a little bit of snow mixing in. Northern Virginia might get up to about maybe an inch, maybe even 2 inches of snow. We'll talk about that. But you kind of see here areas that could mix with a little bit of snow and freezing rain before it changes over to all rain. So this is the probabilities. The left image is just a probability of seeing any freezing rain. So that where you might see at least a light glaze. And so again, you see that the probabilities there getting into the medium there around Louisa, Fluvanna, getting down just west of Farmville. Lynchburg's kind of in this area where you're starting to maybe see at least a 40 to 70% probability of getting a light coating of ice. This would just be like that glaze. And as you get back towards the mountains, definitely seeing a much better chance of getting that light glaze. The right image is where you might see a tenth of an inch of ice, so a little bit more cruel, where you might start to see the tree limbs really starting to sag a little bit, starting to see a little bit more actual accumulation on elevated surfaces. And you see the 81 corridor pretty much at a low to medium probability of getting that coating of ice, even extending a little bit into northern Virginia. So the areas here in yellow and red are the areas that might see a little bit more ice. It might hang on a little bit longer. And again, you might notice some of those trees starting to sag a little bit there. Just the limbs, the small light limbs starting to sag a little bit, Tuesday morning before things change over. Looking at the snowfall, the left-hand image here is our forecast from all the different National Weather Service offices. So, you just basically see maybe a suggestion here from Roanoke North where the freezing rain might mix a little bit with snow. If you look at the worst case here, you do notice maybe far northern Virginia up around Winchester, maybe right along the West Virginia border. Maybe you can push 1 to 2 inches of snow potentially. It probably wouldn't actually accumulate to 1 to 2 inches. It just you might see 2 inches of snow fall from the sky, but with it mixing with freezing rain, it's going to actually be beating it down. But could see a little bit more snow, over far northern Virginia, the ridge line there, and then up near Winchester. Maybe you could get maybe an inch or two up there. But again, that's going to be mixing with freezing rain too. So just kind of idea where you might see a little bit more snow hanging on before it changes over to freezing rain really late tonight and early tomorrow morning. As far as timing of this whole event, you can kind of see here, kind of city by city across the area. Most people are going to be rain except for the west. But you definitely notice maybe starting here about 9 p.m. tonight is the first time you start to see some of these ice icons showing up around Whitville. Maybe here towards Blacksburg, you start to see that wintry mix starting to get in. And then by midnight tonight, you do see more stations here, Galax, Harrisonburg, Luray, Lynchburg, starting to get into that wintry mix here right around midnight. And that does continue until about, daybreak or so. And then about 9 a.m. is when we might start to see things transitioning over. Blacksburg maybe starting to change over to rain by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Still hanging on at Culpeper and Danville, maybe a little bit longer. And then you get down here further north, Harrisonburg, might be still hanging on to the mixed precip, light freezing rain. Same with Louisa and Luray. You do notice Winchester way up north does kind of hang on the longest, maybe till around noon or so. They might keep that wintry mix going just a little bit longer. And you look at the temperatures, and a lot of temperatures upper 20s to maybe right around freezing here for a while. But if you look at by around noon or so, you really notice everybody is pretty much above freezing by 12 o'clock. You see all these temperatures here are above 32 degrees. So this should just be a morning type of an event to kind of watch, maybe impacting some travel. Might notice the icing in the trees. But then, once you start getting close to noon and you see these temperatures getting above freezing, obviously there's no more freezing rain. And temperature's still cool, but we stay above freezing really through the rest of the day on Tuesday. So that's really just a late tonight, really early Tuesday morning type of a situation where we'll have to watch travel, maybe people commuting, things like that. This shouldn't be a power outage issue, not enough icing to cause that issue, more of just a travel issue, slick sidewalks, slick, stairways, things like that. So maybe a little bit of a travel problem, just a minor issue, but that's going to be about it. This is not just looking at precipitation totals. So once it changes over, to rainfall, we are going to see some pretty good rainfall widespread, about a ½ inch to an inch of rainfall across the entire area. Of course, some of that's going to be mixed with, snow and freezing rain in the west, but really the whole Commonwealth should see a good slug of rainfall overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, eventually kind of ending tomorrow afternoon as far as the rain is concerned. So that's good news. Maybe even see a little bit more than an inch once you get out towards Eastern Shore and maybe parts of Hampton Roads. We might get a little bit more than an inch of rain out there. So what I'll show you here is kind of a simulated reflectivity here. This is using one of our models and statistics. So this is a neat way to look at it. So this is what things might look like here as we push through late tonight and tomorrow. So this is about 11 p.m. tonight. Now, some of the models do suggest that we might see a little bit of more light freezing rain, coming up through Galax and up to Roanoke by around, let's say, midnight or so. So it could be a little bit faster than this, but it gives you an idea that this stuff moves in tonight by around midnight. Here's 1 a.m. where you're starting to see that light freezing rain. So bottom line is it's coming at us, spreading in from the south and then moving to the north. And so it's going to be coming across Galax and Roanoke earlier. I'd say maybe right before midnight till about 1 a.m. and continuing to kind of spread up the mountains here in the Shenandoah Valley here, getting up towards Charlottesville. Let's say by about maybe 2 to 3 in the morning. This is saying maybe as late as 4. You see a little bit of more snow here right along the West Virginia border. But you do notice Galax up to Roanoke is still in that wintry mix with those mix of freezing rain and rain there. And that's about 4 in the morning. Continuing to move ahead, you do notice it does try to change over from rain, from freezing rain to rain from south to north, just like the precipitation's moving in from south to north. The warm air is also going to come in from south to north. But this is right here at the 6 a.m. time frame. Let me see if I can turn off these samples. That's annoying. There you go. So it's just around 6 a.m. And you do notice, Roanoke north up 81 is still kind of in that freezing rain area. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. Even over towards parts of maybe western Louisa might still be a little bit into that freezing rain as well. Northern Virginia, notice is showing you might be a little bit more snow up there around Winchester, during the morning commute. So suggesting it might be cold enough to hold on to snow there. But even Harrisonburg's changing over from snow to more of that sleet, freezing rain combination by about 6 a.m. So going to have to watch that morning commute. Could be a little bit of an issue there in the west. As we push into about 7 o'clock and eventually 8 o'clock, you definitely see that warmer temperatures and the freezing rain area really starting to shrink, even though around Winchester, it's still holding on to that snow, maybe mixing in with some sleet and freezing rain there up in the far northern Virginia. Charlottesville, probably getting out of the freezing rain by about 9 a.m., starting to change over to mostly rain. And as we push into about 9 o'clock and by 10 o'clock, you see things are really transitioning. Again, maybe just some pockets of snow at elevations there along the West Virginia border, and maybe far northern Virginia might still be hanging on to a little bit of snow there. But as you push into the noon hour, things are pretty much, that's it. We're pretty much done. Let me get over to the noon hour. Things are pretty much changing over to pretty much all rain everywhere. And rain's actually starting to let up a little bit in the west, but you still have some decent rain going on here in the far east. Do notice how you still see the snow hanging on over West Virginia, but not so much in Virginia at all. And as you kind of move forward in time, see that snow, it gets hung up in West Virginia, but does not make it into Virginia tomorrow afternoon. So we'll see things ending pretty quickly in the afternoon from west to east. And the rain actually eventually pulls away and should be almost getting out of the Hampton Roads area, getting out of the east almost by the evening commute by 6 p.m. You don't see much rain here at all in the east. So really just looking like this is going to be a morning issue, late tonight, morning issue for some light freezing rain and some light snow causing some travel problems, and then really widespread rain, through most of the day. And the rain will end from west to east tomorrow. So kind of a nice little simulation there, kind of walking you through this entire event. Looking at, there's another system. We talked about that system that might come through later this week. So this is a 7-day total precipitation. It takes us all the way through next weekend. And, we'll see what happens there. We could see a little bit more rain, especially in the southeast. So, we pick up maybe an inch or so, half an inch to an inch out of this event in the southeast Virginia. And then maybe we pick up, maybe another, half inch to an inch again there on Friday into Saturday. So we'll see. And we'll see what happens here in the West. Again, Friday into Saturday is still a big question mark. You can see a lot more precipitation to our south. So it just has to do with how that system tracks. And there's just not much confidence right now in exactly what's going to happen with that. So we'll have another briefing here on Thursday. If we need to do one on Wednesday, we will. If it looks like things are trending snowier, we will probably do a special briefing on Wednesday just to give folks a heads up. But right now, not looking too exciting, and the models are not a lot of confidence that far out right now. Just looking at the winds, since there'll be a little bit of a breeze, notice how that, right after the freezing rain ends, there is going to be a little bit of a light northwest wind here up around Luray, maybe 15 to 20 mile per hour gusts. Remember, the freezing rain changes over to rain, so it shouldn't be that much of an issue. That temperatures are going to warm, so any ice in the trees should start to melt pretty quickly, even though the breeze is going to pick up tomorrow afternoon. The ice should not be hanging around, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. I just wanted to show that some of those northwest winds are going to pick up a little bit with that front that comes through as the precip, starts to move to the east. The wind's going to pick up a little bit, maybe gusting up to 15 to 20 miles per hour. But don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. Don't think we're going to have enough ice where the wind's going to be a problem, and it's going to be getting too warm. The ice should be melting pretty quickly. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. But I did kind of want to show that the winds do pick up a little bit tomorrow afternoon. Just looking at the week ahead, we do stay pretty seasonally cool this week. In fact, that's a pretty good front. You'll notice it comes through late Thursday into Friday. So look at the Friday high temperatures are pretty cold across the entire Commonwealth. You definitely see that front that comes through Tuesday with the low temperatures, Wednesday morning, getting well into the teens and 20s everywhere, just about. And then you see another good cold shot that comes through with early cold temperatures Friday morning. Everybody's pretty much again in the 20s. So going to see a little bit of some cooler temperatures with a couple fronts, and Friday does look like the coolest day this week. So that's why we'll just have to watch the precipitation. You see the chances of precipitation here late Friday into Saturday. So it really kind of runs from 6 p.m. till about, let's say, noon on Saturday. So we'll have to watch out what happens here with these chances of precipitation and exactly what the temperatures are going to look like. How much precipitation might there be? I mean, the models have really kind of backed off on how much precipitation we might actually see. So just kind of, this is a lot to be determined out here. So we'll keep an eye on it. If it starts to be, concerning to us midweek, we'll definitely start putting out some more updates. We will definitely have another briefing that will be sent out for the state on Thursday, as we always do. So we'll be looking at it really closely. If not by Thursday, maybe even a little bit sooner. And this is just looking at the outlook, looking out to even to the next week or so. Continued cold, at least, better chances that we're going to be slightly below normal for temperatures here for a while. Notice it really impacting the whole Great Lakes and Northeast. Really good confidence they're going to remain cold here for a little while with that kind of a dip in the jet stream. And we'll have to watch some of these southern stream systems as they come up. Do they interact with this cold air? We are better chances we will see continued above normal precipitation at least through December 10th. Once you get past December 10th, the probabilities, things get a little more normal. We kind of maybe get out of this wet pattern and maybe we get kind of more into a normal pattern. So we'll see how that plays out. But at least colder than normal on average and maybe a little bit wetter than normal December 6th to December 10th. And then maybe things start to regulate back to normal after that. We'll see what happens. And with that, that's all I've got for the briefing today. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.